Kill the Child. Written by Speedwagon's Glorious Mane. Read by Yours Pranks. Chapter 3. Interrogation. Summary. Aizawa is interrogated by a detective, a salaryman, and a strip club bouncer / male stripper. Shota wasn't surprised when he answered the door to find a detective on his doorstep less than 24 hours after he sent the text. He simply closed his eyes before letting out a long sigh. When he opened them again, the detective was watching him with a wary look on his face. Shota just shrugged. I was warned this might happen. He checked the time on his watch and saw that Hizashi's shift wouldn't end for another few hours. That should hopefully give him enough time to get this over with and come back home before Hisashi. He pulled on his shoes, glad he didn't bother changing out of his hero costume before his post-patrol nap, and stepped outside, locking the door behind him. The detective watched him in poorly disguised surprise before clearing his throat. I'm gonna have to ask you to come with me so you can answer a few questions. Shota grunted in ascension as he looked the detective up and down. He looked vaguely familiar, with his dark hair and tan trench coat. Shota narrowed his eyes. You're that detective with the lie detector quirk, right? The man blinked in surprise before nodding. Yes, that's me. Among the cars parked in front of the apartment building, Shota spied a navy blue sedan with windows dark enough to nearly match the paint job. That was the car the detective led him toward, because of course it was. The detective placed a hand on the back door handle, but paused and turned to Shota. Before we start, I have to ask, are you aware of exactly who you contacted? Shota narrowed his eyes. No, my informant refused to tell me. The detective nodded, knocking once against the door, in what could have almost passed as an accident if Shota wasn't paying attention to each and every move the detective made. The detective opened the door and gestured for Shota to climb in. Shota hesitated for a moment, but figured that the detective wouldn't take no for an answer. Once inside the car, Shota was able to get a look at the other occupants of the vehicle. The man sitting next to him in the backseat was huge, towering over Shota even while he sat down. He was wearing a tight black shirt and khaki shorts. Shota noticed a wisp of short blonde hair escaping out of the back under his cap before accidentally making eye contact. The man was staring at Shota over his sunglasses with piercing blue eyes that pinned Shota into place with their intensity. With his bright blue eyes, chiseled jaw, and bodybuilder physique, he looked one part strip club bouncer and one part male stripper. Tearing his gaze away from the man, he looked to the occupied seat in front of him. This man was also tall, though he looked closer to your everyday office worker with the gray suit and glasses. If it wasn't for the way his suit failed to completely hide his musculature. Shota wouldn't be surprised if the man was some kind of secret agent for the government. With a quick, suspicious glare at the man's green hair, Shota briefly wondered if this man was related to Midoriya, but quickly dismissed the thought. The detective climbed into the driver's seat then, and they were off. Shota leaned back in his seat to try to get comfortable. He could almost smell the long and uncomfortable conversation that was about to happen. Thankfully, he didn't have to wait long for the man in the suit to speak. Aizawa Shota, hero name Eraserhead, an underground hero who's been making waves since your debut fresh out of UA's hero course. Currently dating fellow pro hero Present Mike, also known as Yamada Hisashi. We took a look at your known affiliates and couldn't figure out how you came across the phone number you used to contact one of my associates. So, why don't you enlighten us? He said all of this without even glancing up, raising Shota's hackles. Shota let his head fall back to bounce a little against the upholstery. What part of an anonymous informant is unclear to you? How did you meet this informant? The blond man asked, having turned his whole upper body towards Shota to get a better look at him. His voice was quiet, like he was purposely making sure not to startle Shota or something, yet it still cut through the conversation. The bright blue eyes Shota had noticed earlier were unblinking as he stared Shota down, And Shota was brave enough to admit that it was intimidating.
They showed up at my apartment at 6 in the morning one day, completely unannounced, and asked for my help on a matter unrelated to the Shimura case. Truth.
The detective called from the driver's seat without looking away from the road.
And you just decided to trust them?
Blondie asked, his voice still hushed. Shota stared at the man with his patented unsettling look.
I have my reasons.
Looking appropriately perturbed, Blondie cleared his throat before he continued.
Did they say anything about the Shimura family and why they want to find them?
Shota pulled out his notepad, the one that Midoriya had scribbled in, and flipped to the page on Tenko.
The whole Shimura family since Tenko is dead, victims of Tenko's traumatic quirk manifestation. Tenko is now in danger from...
He squinted at the little acronym Midoriya had written down. It seemed almost familiar, but Shota couldn't place what the letters AFO stood for at that moment, so he just settled on
a villain.
The blonde man gasped.
How can you be sure that your informant is correct?
His voice raised a couple of decibels before a suit sent him a glare, making him lower his voice again.
Besides the fact that after passing along the information, my informant told me that I would likely be picked up by a detective with a lie detector quirk and questioned about how I got that number.
Shota asked dryly.
When I expressed my concerns about the person I was contacting, they made sure to reassure me that I won't be left to decompose in a landfill afterwards. So, I am really hoping that his information remains as accurate as it has proven to be.
Shota tacked on with a long, deadpan stare directed at the blonde man, who was looking rather uncomfortable. Shota could see Suit's eye twitch in the rearview mirror, and Shota couldn't tell if it was from amusement or if this man was actually just a hairbreadth away from murdering Shota. Blondie cleared his throat.
No, you don't need to worry about that. Now that we no longer have any doubts about the accuracy of my informant's information, they told me that when you come to pick me up and interrogate me, I should mention that a pediatric quirk specialist operating in Musutafu has connections to a villain known as...
Shota trailed off when he failed to recall the name, before flipping to the page of his notepad he had written the info down on, skimming it. He frowned when he saw the name. It was a rather odd one.
All for one.
Ah, that must be what the acronym stood for.
3 heads whipped around to gape at Shota, who glared at the detective. Eyes on the road.
The detective turned back to the road, correcting their course before pulling over. Where did you hear that name? Suit demanded, only now pausing to look at Shota when he addressed him.
My informant,
Shota said stiffly. The whole car was tense, like a trap ready to be sprung, and Shota had to make a conscious effort to prevent himself from activating his quirk.
Your informant?
The blonde asked, his face stony and voice taking on an edge of steel.
What is their name? I can't answer that,
Shota replied. What do they look like? Suit demanded. Shota's hand crept towards his capture weapon.
I am not going to compromise the identity of my informant.
The blonde scrutinized Shota.
We need to make sure that you weren't approached by a villain.
Shota thought of Midoriya's wide eyes and chubby cheeks as he stood on Shota's doorstep in his All Might onesie.
Trust me, they're not a villain.
He paused for a second as he thought. He could probably share this one thing. It's not like they could possibly be able to lead it back to Midoriya.
They're a retired pro hero. That's all you're getting out of me.
What was their hero name? Suit immediately asked.
What did I just say?
Shota asked Suit with a sharp look.
If I may,
the blonde asked, suddenly looking apprehensive.
Did this informant happen to be between 3 and 4 feet tall?
Shota stiffened. There was no way he had heard that correctly.
What?
The blonde man was starting to look like he had licked a lemon,
And did he have gray hair? What the hell?
Shota remembered Midoriya's advice about not giving information away.
No comment.
The man stared at Shota for a few seconds before visibly deflating.
I am so sorry, Eraserhead-san. Tsukauchi, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Eraserhead does not appear to be a threat.
Both the detective and Suit shared a look.
I'm sorry, what? I'll second that.
Shota had no idea what was going on.
We should have realized there are only so many people who know of All for One's existence. We should have realized who your informant was when he refused to contact me himself.
Suit blinked. Wait, you think the informant is Gran?
Plausible deniability!
The blonde almost shouted, cutting Suit off.
We officially know nothing about this informant's identity, and we should keep it that way, he rushed out.
Shota was so lost that he wasn't sure that he could figure out the heads nor tails of this conversation, even with the map. At this point, he was too afraid to ask for clarification. As long as these people stopped asking about his informant and let him go home, that was fine with him. Suit finally seemed to get the memo and asked no further questions about his informant. Instead, asking for the info Midoriya had given him. Shota narrowed his eyes.
Are you in charge of the task force to bring All for One down?
He hazarded a guess. The blonde smiled wryly.
Something like that. Rest assured that anything you tell us will not leave the circle.
Shota nodded. Some ID would be nice to see, but he guessed he'd just have to live without. With all the secrecy around the owner of the phone number's identity and this villain, it was probably safer for him to know only what he needed to know. He didn't need to end up on some sort of secret government watch list or something. Shota happily gave them all the info he had about the Shimuros and the quirk specialists, and in no time, he was being dropped off outside of his apartment.
Once again, I am so very sorry about this. We could have gone about this better.
Shota cut him off with a raised hand.
It's fine. No harm, no foul.
As long as they let him escape into his apartment without further questioning, everything would be okay.
If your informant gives you any more information on All for One and his associates, you know how to contact us,
the blonde said solemnly. Oh, and one last question. Suit cut in. Shota sighed and prayed for patience.
Yes.
I've been wondering about why your informant would contact you for people to pass on this information. This information is delicate, and knowing it will put a target on your back. So, why did he choose you? Shota glared at the side of Suit's head. This guy's attitude was really getting on Shota's nerves. Shota had to word his answer carefully.
My informant contacted me because he felt my quirk would be useful.
True. The detective piped up from the front seat. Oh? And what is your quirk? Suit asked. For the first time in the whole conversation, he actually looked at Shota. Shota grit his teeth.
Erasure. I can erase quirks as long as I'm looking at the users.
Suit's face went slack with shock. You can erase multiple quirks at once? He asked eagerly.
As long as I'm looking at them,
Shota replied stiffly. Suit and Blonde exchanged a significant look before Suit turned back to Shota. We'll be in contact with you soon. He bid the men a final goodbye before getting out of the car and shutting the door with perhaps a touch too much force. As he stepped into the lobby, he heard the car take off, and Shota breathed a sigh of relief. Once he got to his apartment, he closed the door behind him, kicking off his boots before flopping down on the couch. He still had a bit of time before Hisashi came home, so he had all the privacy he could need to make this call. He pulled up his contacts and clicked on the one titled Brat, and waited for it to connect. Midoriya picked up on the fifth ring.
Sup?
Shota glowered at the wall.
I have some questions.
Oh, did they just drop you off? What did they tell you?
Pretty much nothing. They freaked out when I dropped All for One's name, but that's it. They didn't tell me who they were or give me any names.
Midoriya hummed.
That sounds about right. So what questions do you have?
Shota tossed up between which one to ask first.
They kept asking me about your identity, especially once I mentioned All for One. They started asking some weird questions.
Like what?
Shota frowned.
There was this one guy. He was blonde and looked kind of like a meathead. And he started asking me if you were between 3 and 4 feet tall with gray hair.
He was cut off by a weird huffing sound.
Huh?
I told him no comment, and he started apologizing and talking about plausible deniability before driving me straight back home.
Midoriya started giggling on the other end.
Oh my god, they think I'm...
There was a rustling, then muffled laughter. Shota huffed.
Oh, that's so funny.
Midoriya sounded breathless when he answered.
They think someone else. They'll figure it out eventually, but until they do, this is gonna be hilarious.
Shota grit his teeth. A little bit of context would be nice.
Who even are they anyway?
Who showed up to interrogate you?
Midoriya shot back, his voice going back to normal.
They never gave me any names. There was a man in a tan trench coat, the detective.
Tsukachi. Yeah, that sounds right.
Shota rolled his eyes over being interrupted.
Who else?
There was a man with green hair and a suit and glasses, and a blonde man in a t-shirt and khakis.
Midoriya hummed on the other end.
Yeah, I know those guys.
Shota was getting frustrated at the lack of information.
Just who were they? Are they some sort of secret government agents?
Midoriya laughed.
No, they do work for the government, but they're not the shady kind.
Is the green-haired one your father?
Shota had to ask. Shota heard a choking sound. Before there was a sound of keyboard keys clicking. There was some sort of noise in the background that sounded like voices, and Shota wondered what Midoriya was doing.
Oh, my god.
Midoriya whispered, sounding strangled.
In all my years, no one has ever asked me that, so congrats!
Midoriya snickered. Before there was a sound of wrestling and more muffled laughter. Shota rolled his eyes. He was just so glad that the immortal toddler found him so funny. There was a sound of something moving around in the background, and then he could hear All Might calling out his catchphrase. Shota narrowed his eyes.
What are you doing?
Oh, my mom thinks I'm watching All Might's debut. When I was a kid, she just put me in front of the computer and put the video on loop to keep me occupied for a few hours so she could take a nap. I'm not a kid anymore, but I won't say no to unsupervised internet access.
I really didn't need to know that.
There was a pause. Then...
Get your head out of the gutter! I have way more important things to be doing, like, hypothetically, hacking into certain classified databases and taking down government institutions.
You're doing what?
No, don't sound so surprised. I literally told you I was going to do this when we first met.
Shota stared at the wall clock above the TV. It was a cat-themed one Hisashi had gotten him as a gag gift for their 6-month anniversary. From the bottom of it hung a cat's tail that moved back and forth with every tick of the clock. He counted 10 ticks of the clock before saying,
I thought you were joking.
Eraserhead, I joke about many things, like my absent father and Endeavor being a flaming heap of trash. But I would never joke about taking down the government.
Shota let out a little noise of concern.
What if you get caught?
Relax, I won't get caught. Besides, what are the HBSC gonna do if they show up to my house? Arrest me? I'm 4 years old.
How are you even gonna hack into the hero mission?
Shota was struggling to wrap his head around all this. The mental image of 2 men in black trying to put Midoriya in cuffs that were way too big for him while he wore his All Might onesie wasn't helping things.
Oh, you think I lived this long and didn't pick up a few tips and tricks along the way?
Midoriya.
My mom woke up and she'll come to fish me soon. Bye!
The little shit hung up on him. Shota stared down at his phone as the screen blinked before shutting it off and throwing an arm over his eyes. Hisashi found him in that exact position half an hour later when he came home, and like the actual saint he was, said nothing, and just picked Shota up and carried him to the bed for cuddles. With Hisashi's chin tucking to Shota's hair, and his arms around Shota's waist, he couldn't help but think of Midoriya's words. Being married to Yamada Hizashi sounds really nice right now. Fuck. Shota was gonna have to get a ring, wasn't he?
So,
Toshinori, Namasa, and Mirai sat in Toshinori's kitchen, each with a mug of coffee, or in Toshinori's case, a cup of green tea. On the table, Aizawa Shota's file lay spread out in front of them.
So,
Toshinori echoed, before taking a sip of his tea. They sat there in silence for a while. Toshinori stared down at Aizawa's Hero License ID photo. He looked so unassuming. Just a regular man who, admittedly, looked like he needed a nap. In the 3 years since the photo was taken, the dark circles under his eyes had only grown more pronounced. Finally, Mirai closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Oh my god. Aizawa Shota has been a pro hero for 3 years with the perfect quirk to single-handedly take down Alpha One. And we only just found out because Gran Torino practically placed him in our laps. Toshinori swallowed.
We're going to have to bring him into the task force.
Namasa cleared his throat.
I know he's a pro hero, but having a quirk like that, he'll be in danger if Alpha One ever finds out about him.
Toshinori exchanged a glance with Mirai. His eyes were wide.
We need to protect him.
Woo! Oh my gosh, okay. I was not expecting, like, the light bulb moment of reading Sir Night Eye's lines and being like, you know what? He would sound great as a British guy. So now, Mirai gets to have my British guy voice, which I feel kind of fits with, like, his level of, like, douchebaggery that we get to see, you know? I don't know. I mean, Sir Night Eye kind of gets, like, martyred in the series because of, you know? I don't know how frequent he's gonna show up, but I guess now I've established that Sir Night Eye is British. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to this podfic, and of course, I will see you when I do. Toodaloo!